This video examines calculating consumer and producer surplus using the market diagram. Consumer surplus is the difference between the buyer's reservation price and the price that is actually paid for the good or service. What is the buyer's reservation price? This is the maximum dollar amount that a consumer is willing to pay for a good. So consumer surplus is the difference between how much you were willing to pay and how much you actually paid. The producer surplus is the difference between the price received by the supplier and the seller's reservation price. The seller's reservation price is the minimum dollar amount for which the supplier is willing to sell an additional unit of the good. So the producer surplus is the difference between how much the seller gets from selling the good, the market price, and the lowest price at which they were willing to sell their good or service. Let's see this on a diagram. So we have our downward sloping demand curve. We have our upward sloping supply curve, and we're at the equilibrium. We have the equilibrium price, the market price, and the equilibrium quantity, the amount actually bought and sold. Now the consumer surplus is given as the area below the demand curve but above the market price. So the consumer surplus is the entire area below the demand curve but above the market price. Now the buyer's reservation price, or Pmax, is found where the demand curve intersects the price line. How can we get Pmax? The buyer's reservation price is the maximum price the buyer is willing to pay. So to get the buyer's reservation price, we will ask ourselves, what price will the buyer pay if the quantity is equal to 0? So it means that if we are given a demand function and a demand equation, we will simply substitute quantity to be 0 and solve for the buyer's reservation price, Pmax, the maximum price they are willing to pay. Now, producer surplus is the area above the supply curve but below the market price. So the producer surplus is the entire area above the supply curve but below the market price. How do we get the seller's reservation price, Pmin? The seller's reservation price, or Pmin, occurs where the supply curve intersects the price line. To get the seller's reservation price, or Pmin, given a supply equation, we ask ourselves what price would be if quantity is equal to 0. So we will substitute quantity to be 0 into our supply equation and get the seller's reservation price, Pmin. Let's try an example. We're asked to use the diagram below to calculate the total consumer surplus and the total producer surplus at a price of $8 and production of 6 meals per day. This suggests that the equilibrium price, the market price, is $8. This is the price each meal was sold for. The equilibrium quantity of meals was 6 million. 6 million meals were bought and sold. Let's start with the consumer surplus. Now from the diagram, the consumer surplus is the area below the demand curve but above the market price of $8. Now if you look at this area below the demand curve but above the market price of $8, you should see a right angle triangle. To calculate the consumer surplus, we find the area of this right angle triangle. The area of a triangle from our elementary maths is half base times height. Now the base would be the quantity bought or sold. So the base of this triangle would be 6 million. The total quantity actually bought and sold, the equilibrium quantity. The height would be the difference between the market price and the buyer's reservation price. Remember, the buyer's reservation price is found where the demand curve cuts the y-axis. So in our diagram here, the buyer's reservation price would be 14. So our consumer surplus will be half times the base, the equilibrium quantity of 6, times the difference between 14 and 8. The difference between 14 and 8, the height of the triangle, would be 6. So the consumer surplus is a half 6 times 6. So the consumer surplus would be $18 million. Let's try the same for the producer surplus. Now remember, the producer surplus is the area above the supply but below price. What price? The market price of $8. So it's the area above the supply curve but below the $8 market price. To find the producer surplus, we have to find the area of this right angle triangle. The area of a right angle triangle is half base times height. What is the base? The base would be the equilibrium quantity. The base would be 6 million. How do we get the height? The height would be the difference between the market price and the seller's reservation price. Now remember, the seller's reservation price is where the supply curve cuts the price line. If you're using an equation, the seller's reservation price is found by substituting Q is equal to 0. So you plug Q is equal to 0 into the supply equation and solve for the lowest price, P min, that the seller is willing to accept. The difference between the market price and the seller's reservation price of $2 is 6. So the producer surplus will be a half times 6, the quantity, the base, times the height, which is 8 minus 2, $6. So the producer surplus would be 18 million. The final step is to find total surplus. Now, total surplus is the sum of consumer and producer surplus. So from our example, we found the consumer surplus to be 18 million. We found the producer surplus to be 18 million. So total surplus would be 36 million. I hope this video was helpful in calculating producer, consumer surplus and total surplus. Using this same procedure, you can complete question number 5 on graded worksheet number 2. Thank you.